I'm Penelope, 38 female. I live in a quiet, tree-lined suburb with my husband, David, and our wonderful 14-year-old daughter, Lily. By trade, I'm a forensic accountant, a job that suits my meticulous and patient nature, and one that has taught me that numbers, unlike people, never lie. My life, on the surface, was one of carefully constructed order and quiet contentment, a peaceful harbor I had built for my family. But a storm was gathering just beyond the horizon, a storm that had been brewing for 35 years, and it was about to make landfall in the most public and humiliating way imaginable. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Our family has always operated on a system of unspoken rules, a complex hierarchy with my mother, Paige, as its undisputed queen, and my younger sister, Jessica, as her flawless crown princess. I, on the other hand, was the quiet, reliable workhorse, the one who was always there to fix things, to smooth over conflicts, to manage the practicalities while they basked in the spotlight. It was a role I had accepted long ago, a comfortable, if somewhat thankless, position. Jessica was everything I wasn't. Where I was reserved, she was effervescent. Where I found solace in spreadsheets and data, she thrived on social media likes and the fleeting adoration of strangers. She owned a trendy boutique that was less a business and more a backdrop for her influencer lifestyle, funded by a series of investments from our mother that were never expected to be repaid. She was beautiful, charming, and possessed an uncanny ability to make everyone feel like they were the most important person in the world, right up until the moment she no longer needed them. My husband, David, a talented architect, often marveled at the family dynamics. "It's like watching a different species in the wild," he'd say after a family dinner, shaking his head. "The way your mom and sister communicate is all subtext and coded signals." He was my rock, the one person who saw me for who I was, not for the role I was assigned. And then there was Lily, my daughter, my heart. She was a bright, sensitive girl, with my quiet nature and her father's artistic soul. She was at that awkward age where self-consciousness is a constant companion, and navigating the treacherous waters of high school was her daily battle. She adored her Aunt Jessica, seeing her as the epitome of glamour and confidence, a sparkling star she hoped to one day emulate. I tried to temper her admiration with gentle reality checks, but to a 14-year-old, a famous influencer with 1 million followers is far more compelling than a mother who finds joy in balancing ledgers. The occasion for the impending disaster was my mother's 62nd birthday party. It was, as always, to be held at her sprawling home, a monument to my late father's success and my mother's impeccable taste. These parties were not simple family get-togethers, they were productions. Paige would spend weeks planning every detail, from the caterer to the specific shade of hydrangeas. The guest list was a carefully curated collection of old family friends, neighbors who mattered, and a smattering of Jessica's trendy influencer friends who would document the event for their followers. My contribution, as usual, was logistical. I arranged the valet parking, coordinated with the caterer on dietary restrictions, and paid the deposit for the string quartet my mother insisted upon. Jessica's contribution was to show up, look stunning, and charm everyone. It was a familiar division of labor. The week before the party, the family group chat was buzzing. Paige sent endless photos of floral arrangements. Jessica posted selfies from her boutique, modeling the perfect dress for the party. I sent reminders about the parking situation. The day of the party, David could sense my unease. "You have that look," he said, straightening his tie in the mirror. "The bracing for impact look." I forced a smile. "It's just, mom's parties, you know how they are, a lot of performance, not a lot of substance." "And Jessica will be in rare form," he added knowingly. "Don't let them get to you, Pen, or to Lily." That was my biggest fear. Lily was so excited. She had spent 2 weeks searching for the perfect dress, a simple, elegant navy blue dress that made her look more grown-up than I was ready for. She had practiced her makeup, wanting to impress her aunt and her cool friends. I saw the hope in her eyes, the desperate desire to fit in, to be seen as special in the dazzling orbit of her aunt. I just prayed Jessica wouldn't casually extinguish that light with a careless word or a dismissive glance, a talent she had honed to a fine art. As we prepared to leave, Lily came downstairs, looking lovely but nervous. S. He twisted a strand of her hair, her eyes wide. "Do I look okay, Mom?" "You look beautiful, sweetie," I said, meaning it with every fiber of my being. David kissed her forehead. "You look perfect, kiddo." But as we drove to my mother's house, a knot of dread tightened in my stomach. I felt like I was leading my sweet, innocent daughter into a lion's den, armed with nothing but a new dress and a fragile teenage heart. I held her hand, squeezing it gently, and whispered, "Just stick with me and your dad, okay? And remember, you're amazing just the way you are." She nodded, but her eyes were already fixed on the brightly lit mansion at the end of the street, the stage where the night's drama was set to unfold. The party was in full swing when we arrived. The air hummed with conversation and the soft melodies of the string quartet. Waiters weaved through the crowd with trays of champagne and elaborate canapés. My mother, Paige, was the center of it all, holding court near the grand piano, dressed in a shimmering silver gown, accepting compliments with regal grace. She greeted us with air kisses, her eyes flicking over our outfits with a practiced, critical glance. "Penelope, that dress is sensible," she commented, her tone making the word sound like an insult. "David, you look handsome as always. And Lily, my, you've certainly grown up." It was a backhanded compliment designed to make Lily feel both noticed and scrutinized. My sister Jessica was, of course, the life of the party. She was a vision in a vibrant red dress that clung to her like a second skin. She was surrounded by a laughing, adoring circle of her influencer friends, all of them taking endless photos, pouting their lips for selfies, and documenting every moment for their online audiences. When she saw us, she detached herself from her clique and glided over. "Penny, you made it," she exclaimed, her voice loud enough to turn heads. She hugged me stiffly, her cheek barely brushing mine. Her attention, however, was for Lily. "Lilybug, look at you, trying to be all grown up," she said, her eyes sweeping over Lily's navy dress with a faint, dismissive smile. Lily blushed, a mix of pleasure and embarrassment. "I love your dress, Aunt Jessica," she stammered. "Oh, this old thing?" Jessica laughed, striking a pose. "Just something I threw on, you know how it is." The implication was clear. Her effortless glamour was leagues above Lily's carefully chosen effort. It was the first cut of the night, small and shallow, but it drew blood. I saw Lily's shoulders slump just a little. Throughout the evening, the cuts kept coming. My mother would float by and make comments like, "Lily, dear, you should stand up straight. Confidence is so important." Jessica would call Lily over to meet her friends, only to talk over her or finish her sentences, treating her like a cute accessory rather than a person. Each remark, each dismissive gesture, was a tiny pinprick to Lily's already fragile self-esteem. I tried to run interference, pulling Lily away to get a plate of food, introducing her to some of my old, kinder family friends, but the magnetic pull of Jessica and her glamorous world was too strong. Lily kept drifting back, hoping for a crumb of validation from the aunt she idolized. The main event of the night was the toast. Paige stood by the fireplace, champagne flute in hand, and silenced the crowd. She gave a gracious speech, thanking everyone for coming. Then she turned the floor over to her daughters. "Jessica, darling, would you like to say a few words?" Jessica took the center of the room, her smile dazzling. She spoke for 10 minutes not about our mother, but about herself. She wove a tale of her brand, her journey, and how her mother's unwavering support had made it all possible. It was a performance, and the audience was rapt. When she finished, to thunderous applause, Paige beamed. "And Penelope?" she asked, almost as an afterthought. I raised my glass from where I stood. "Happy birthday, Mom, we love you," I said simply. My mother gave a tight, polite nod, and the party resumed. My toast was a footnote, my presence a formality. The final, deepest cut came about an hour later. I was talking to an old family friend on the patio when I realized I hadn't seen Lily for a few minutes. A prickle of anxiety went down my spine. I excused myself and went to look for her. I found her in the living room, standing near the edge of Jessica's circle. My sister was telling a loud, animated story to her friends, and Lily was watching, her expression a mixture of awe and longing. Then Jessica's friend, a sharp-faced woman with an unnaturally smooth forehead, pointed at Lily. "Is that your niece, Jess? She's so quiet." Jessica turned, and a cruel, dismissive smirk crossed her face. She looked Lily up and down, then turned back to her friends, her voice carrying across the room. "Oh, that's Lily. She's my sister's kid." She paused for dramatic effect. "SH. E's just like her mother, pathetic." The word hung in the air, sharp and venomous. Laughter rippled through Jessica's friends. I saw the exact moment the word hit Lily. Her face crumpled. The light in her eyes extinguished, replaced by a wave of pure, unadulterated hurt. Tears welled up and began to stream down her cheeks. She stood frozen, a statue of humiliation, as my sister and her friends laughed at her expense. A white-hot rage, an emotion I had suppressed for decades, surged through me. In that instant, every small slight, every backhanded compliment, every moment of being overlooked and undervalued coalesced into a single point of unbearable pressure. I walked across the room, my steps silent and deliberate. The laughter died as they saw the look on my face. I didn't say a word to Jessica. I didn't even look at her. My focus was entirely on my daughter. I took Lily's hand. It was cold and trembling. "We're leaving," I said, my voice low and steady. I turned and walked her towards the door, away from the poison. As we reached the foyer, my mother's voice cut through the sudden silence. "Penelope, where are you going? Don't make a scene." I didn't stop. As my hand touched the doorknob, her voice came again, laced with the familiar venom of her disappointment. It wasn't loud, but it was clear, and it was meant for me to hear. "Mistake, child." The words, a cruel nickname from my childhood, a label I thought had been long forgotten, struck me like a physical blow. It was the final confirmation. I wasn't just the less favored daughter, I was the mistake. I opened the door, led my weeping daughter out into the cool night air, and walked away from the gilded cage, finally understanding that it was never a home, only a prison. The drive home was a blur of streetlights seen through my own tear-filled eyes. Lily sobbed quietly in the passenger seat, a heartbreaking sound that tore at my soul. David, who had seen the whole thing unfold from across the room and was right behind us as we walked out, drove our car, his jaw tight with a silent fury that mirrored my own. When we got home, I took Lily straight to her room, wrapped her in a warm blanket, and held her as she cried herself to sleep. The words "pathetic" and "mistake, child" echoed in my head, a cruel chorus to my daughter's pain. David found me in the kitchen an hour later, staring at a cold cup of tea. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Pen," he whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't punch your sister in her perfect, veneered teeth." A watery laugh escaped me. "Believe me, I was about 2 seconds away from doing it myself." We stood there in silence for a long time. The carefully constructed piece of our lives had been shattered, and I had no idea how to piece it back together. "What they did tonight," he began, his voice thick with anger, "it wasn't just a mean comment at a party. It was cruel. It was targeted, especially what your mom said to you." He was right. Mistake, child. It was a name Paige had given me when I was 7, after I'd accidentally broken a porcelain doll that had belonged to her mother. Jessica, ever the perfect one, had never broken anything. The name stuck for years, a constant reminder of my perceived clumsiness, my otherness, my failure to be the daughter my mother wanted. I thought she had forgotten it, or at least had the decency to bury it. Hearing it again, especially after what happened to Lily, felt like a deliberate act of emotional violence. Sleep was impossible. I spent the night replaying the scene over and over, each time feeling a fresh wave of rage and helplessness. But as the sun began to rise, the helplessness started to recede, replaced by something else, a cold, hard resolve. I was a forensic accountant. My entire career was built on finding the truth hidden in plain sight, on uncovering deception buried under layers of plausible deniability. Jessica and my mother had operated in the shadows of emotional manipulation for years. It was time to turn on the lights. My first move was to cut them off. I blocked Paige and Jessica on my phone and all social media. I wrote a short, clear email to my mother's general account. After the disgusting and abusive behavior you and Jessica displayed towards my daughter and me last night, we will be having no further contact. Do not attempt to call, text, or visit. It was a declaration of war, and I knew it. Around 10 in the morning, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and my stomach clenched. It was my mother, Paige, standing on my doorstep, her face a mask of strained concern. She looked tired and, for the first time in her life, a little desperate. I opened the door but blocked the entrance with my body. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice devoid of warmth. "Penelope, please," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "We need to talk. What you did last night, just walking out, you embarrassed me. You embarrassed the whole family." "You and Jessica humiliated my daughter," I countered, my voice dangerously low. "You emotionally abused a 14-year-old girl in front of a crowd of people, and then you called me a mistake child. The time for talking is over." Paige's composure began to crack. The mask of matriarchal concern slipped, revealing the raw panic beneath. "You don't understand," she said, her eyes pleading. "Jessica she's in a delicate situation right now. She's about to close a huge deal, a partnership for her boutique with a major national brand. The man behind it, Mr. Sterling, is very conservative, very focused on family values. If a scandal, a story about a family rift, gets out on her social media..." She didn't need to finish. I understood perfectly. This wasn't about Lily's pain or my feelings. This was about damage control. It was about protecting Jessica's brand, her perfect, curated life. "Please," Paige begged, and now the tears in her eyes looked real. "Please, don't ruin your sister's life. Whatever she said, she was just stressed. She didn't mean it. Just put something on your social media, a picture of you two, something to show everyone we're all fine. That's all I'm asking." Her words were a slap in the face. She wanted me to smooth it over, to pretend it never happened, to sacrifice my daughter's dignity for Jessica's business deal. It was in that moment, seeing the selfish panic in my mother's eyes, that a crucial piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Jessica's life, her boutique, her influencer status. It was all a house of cards, and I suspected my mother was the one holding it up. "No," I said, the word tasting like freedom. "I will not lie for her. I will not pretend that what you both did was acceptable. You are not welcome here. Goodbye, Paige." I closed the door on her shocked face. The pleas continued for a few more minutes, then silence. As I leaned against the door, my heart pounding, my professional instincts kicked in. A delicate situation, a business deal dependent on a family values image, a mother willing to beg and lie to protect her favored daughter's reputation. This wasn't just a family drama anymore. This was a financial matter, and I knew exactly where to start digging. My mother's plea had not been a plea for forgiveness. It had been a confession. It was a roadmap to my sister's vulnerabilities. She had handed me a key, and I was about to unlock every door she had ever tried to keep closed. My home office, usually a sanctuary of order and calm, became my war room. For years, I had dutifully, if resentfully, managed my mother's finances. It was another of my unspoken family duties. After my father passed away, he left my mother a substantial portfolio of stocks, bonds, and real estate. I was the one who made sure her taxes were filed, her investments were sound, and she had a steady stream of income. She had given me full power of attorney, a decision she'd made out of convenience, never imagining I would use that access for anything other than her benefit. I started where all good forensic accountants start, with the bank statements. For years, I had seen the regular, substantial transfers from my mother's main investment account to a secondary checking account. The memo line always read the same: household expenses. I had never questioned it. My mother lived in a large house. Her expenses were naturally high. But now, armed with a new and potent suspicion, I looked closer. I downloaded 3 years' worth of statements from that secondary account, the one page used for her discretionary spending. I poured the data into a spreadsheet, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I began to categorize the outflows, and a pattern quickly emerged. There were the expected expenses: landscaping services, property taxes, high-end grocery bills, charges from Neiman Marcus and Saks. But then there were the others. Thousands of dollars every month transferred directly to an account under the name J. Lane Designs. Jessica's full name was Jessica L. Ain. Thousands more went to a corporate American Express card that I knew was in Jessica's name. Then there were the big ones. A wire transfer for $50,000 to a high-end commercial realtor in the city's most expensive shopping district. Another for $30,000 to a branding and marketing agency. And the most damning of all, regular, monthly payments of several $1,000s to a luxury car dealership for a lease on a brand new Porsche. The very same Porsche Jessica flaunted on her Instagram as a symbol of her hard-earned success. My sister wasn't just being supported by our mother, she was being entirely bankrolled. The boutique, the car, the glamorous trips, the designer wardrobe, it was all a sham, funded by my late father's legacy. My mother wasn't just investing in her daughter's business, she was systematically draining her own retirement funds to maintain the illusion of Jessica's success. The rage that had been simmering within me since the party now had a focus. It wasn't just the emotional cruelty, it was the breathtaking hypocrisy. They had mocked my daughter, calling her pathetic, from a pedestal built on lies and my father's money. But I knew this was only the first layer. A failing business propped up by family money was a sad, common story. To truly understand the delicate situation my mother had mentioned, I needed to dig deeper into the business itself. I used a public records database to pull the incorporation documents for J. Lane Designs. My sister was listed as the sole owner. I then accessed a business credit report. The results were startling. The business had multiple outstanding liens from vendors for unpaid invoices. It had a D rating for creditworthiness. It was hemorrhaging money. This didn't make sense. If my mother was pouring so much cash into the business, why were vendors not getting paid? Where was all the money going? The answer, I suspected, lay in the deal Paige had mentioned. The partnership with the family values, conservative, Mr. Sterling. A quick search revealed that Sterling Assets was a major retail investment firm known for acquiring and scaling up promising small brands. For them to be interested in Jessica's boutique, they must have been shown a very different set of books. This is where my skills became particularly useful. I knew Jessica was not sophisticated enough to run 2 sets of books. She must have had help. For the past 5 years, I had recommended the same reputable accounting firm to everyone in the family, including Jessica. I still had contacts there. I made a call to a senior partner, an old colleague named Arthur. Arthur, it's Penelope. I have a rather sensitive family matter and I need some advice off the record. I explained that I was helping my mother assess her investments and needed to understand the financial health of my sister's company. Citing my power of attorney over my mother's accounts, which were the source of the boutique's funding, I asked him to pull the profit and loss statements and balance sheets that his firm had prepared for J. Lane Designs. When he sent them over, encrypted and confidential, my blood ran cold. The documents were pristine. They showed a healthy, growing business with impressive profit margins and minimal debt. Sales figures were robust, and inventory turnover was excellent. It was a picture of a thriving, successful boutique, the perfect candidate for an acquisition by a firm like Sterling Assets. But it was a complete fiction. I compared the numbers on the official P&L statements with the reality I had pieced together from my mother's bank records and the business credit report. The sales numbers were inflated by at least 300%. The debts to vendors were completely omitted. The massive cash infusions from my mother were listed not as loans or parental support, but as revenue from sales. It was fraud, clear, unambiguous, and criminal. Jessica, with the help of a complicit accountant at the firm, had created a phantom company to present to potential investors. She wasn't just trying to get a partnership. She was trying to trick Sterling Assets into buying a worthless, failing business for a multi-million-dollar price tag. And my mother knew. Her desperate plea for me to not ruin Jessica's life was a plea to not expose their massive fraud. This was the delicate situation. An imminent multi-million-dollar deal was on the line, and I was the only one who held the proof of the lie. The game had changed. This was no longer about a family squabble. It was about justice, and I was going to deliver it. With the fraudulent financials in hand, I had the what. Now I needed the how and the who. Jessica was the face of the operation, but she didn't have the financial acumen to orchestrate this level of deception. My mother was the bank, but she wouldn't know how to manipulate accounting software. There had to be another player, a skilled architect behind the scenes who had built this house of cards. My mind immediately went to the accounting firm. Someone there had to be complicit. I printed out the fraudulent P&L statements Arthur had sent me and laid them next to the real financial data I'd compiled from my mother's bank records. The discrepancies were glaring, but the forgeries were expertly done. The documents were formatted perfectly, using the official templates of the accounting firm. Whoever did this had access and knowledge. I started by cross-referencing the dates of the largest, most suspicious transfers from my mother's account to Jessica's business. One transfer for $75,000, labeled inventory purchase, stood out. It was dated just 3 days before Jessica announced on Instagram that she had sold out of her spring collection. It was a lie designed to create the illusion of high demand. The money wasn't for inventory. It was to cover the boutique's rent and payroll for the next quarter. I decided to take a more direct approach. I called Arthur at the accounting firm again. "Arthur," I said, my voice calm and professional, "I'm looking at the financials for J Lane Designs and I'm seeing some inconsistencies I can't reconcile. Can you tell me which partner is assigned to this account?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Let me check," he said. I could hear the clicking of a keyboard. "It looks like the lead on that account is a junior accountant. Name is Michael Turner." The name didn't ring a bell. "Has he been with the firm long?" I asked. "A few years," Arthur replied. "He's considered a real go-getter, ambitious." Ambitious enough to commit fraud for a client? It was possible, but it felt incomplete. A junior accountant might be pressured or bribed into fudging some numbers, but creating an entirely fictitious financial history for a company seemed above his pay grade, and the risk would be immense. There was still a piece missing. That evening, as David and I were cleaning up after dinner, I talked him through my findings. I laid out the bank statements, the fake P&L, the credit reports. David, with his architect's mind, saw structures and systems in everything. He looked at the mess of papers spread across our dining table, not as a random collection of data, but as a blueprint. "It's all too clean," he said, tapping a finger on the fraudulent P&L. "Jessica is chaos personified. Her life, her business. It's a mess, but this," he pointed to the document, "this is meticulous. This is organized. This is the work of someone who thinks like you do, Penn." His words sparked an idea. I had been so focused on the financial trail that I had overlooked the personal one. Jessica's world revolved around social media. Her entire life, or the version she wanted people to see, was documented on her Instagram. I had blocked her, but it was easy enough to view her profile through David's account. I spent the next 2 hours scrolling back through 3 years of posts, a nauseating journey through contrived-looking, candid shots, luxury vacations, and endless selfies. I wasn't looking for clues. I was just immersing myself in her world, hoping something would shake loose. And then I saw it. It was a post from about 1.5 years ago, a group photo from a charity gala. There was Jessica, draped in diamonds, smiling next to a tall, handsome man. The caption read, "So proud of this one for co-chairing such a wonderful event, the best brother-in-law a girl could ask for. Thanks for all your amazing business advice, David." David, my husband. The room went silent. The air grew thick and heavy. I zoomed in on the photo. David had his arm around Jessica's shoulders, both of them smiling for the camera. It was a perfectly normal photo. But the caption? "Amazing business advice." I scrolled through more photos. There he was again, at the grand opening of her boutique. And again, in a business lunch selfie with Jessica, the two of them clinking glasses. Little moments I had barely registered at the time. Moments I had dismissed as my kind, supportive husband helping out his flighty sister-in-law. My blood turned to ice. I looked at David, who was sitting across the table, watching me with a concerned expression. "What is it, Penn?" I turned the phone around and showed him the photo. I watched his face as he read the caption. A flicker of something guilt, fear, passed through his eyes before he could mask it. "Oh, that," he said, forcing a casual laugh. "You know Jessica, always exaggerating. I just gave her some basic advice about her lease." "What kind of advice, David?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "What kind of amazing business advice have you been giving my sister?" He started to stammer to deflect. "You know, just general stuff, how to negotiate with vendors, things like that, nothing serious." But I wasn't a grieving wife anymore. I was a forensic accountant with a target. I stood up and walked back to my office. I pulled up our personal financial records. David managed his own architecture firm, and I had always trusted him completely with that side of our finances. We kept our professional accounts separate, a clean arrangement we'd agreed on years ago. It took me less than 10 minutes to find it. A series of payments from his business account, disguised as consulting fees, paid out to a Michael Turner, the same ambitious junior accountant from the firm. The amounts weren't huge, just a few $1,000s each, but the dates were damning. Each payment was made within a week of the fraudulent financials being prepared for Jessica's company. David hadn't just given her advice. He had hired the accountant. He had paid him to cook the books. He was the architect. My husband, the man I loved and trusted, the father of my child, had helped my sister build a fraudulent empire, and he had used our money to do it. The betrayal was absolute, a chasm that opened up right there in our home. He had stood by my side, feigning outrage and support, all while being the silent partner in my family's deception. The party hadn't just been an attack from my sister and mother, it had been a betrayal from within my own marriage. The confrontation with David was the hardest thing I have ever done. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply laid out the evidence on the kitchen table, just as I would for a client. The bank statements from his business account, the invoices for consulting fees to Michael Turner, and the perfectly forged P&L statements for Jessica's boutique. I placed them in a neat row next to the photos of him and Jessica from her Instagram. "Explain this," I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel. Crumbled. The confident, supportive husband I knew dissolved into a stammering, pathetic stranger. He confessed everything. It had started small, he claimed. Jessica had come to him a few years ago, crying because her boutique was failing. She begged him for help, not for money, but for his brilliant business mind. It stroked his ego. He liked being the hero, the one who could fix things. He started giving her advice, helping her structure her business plan. But the business was a black hole. The more advice he gave, the more money she lost. Then came the idea for the Sterling Assets acquisition. It was Jessica's get-rich-quick scheme, but David was the one who made it plausible. He was the one who found Michael Turner, a young, greedy accountant at the firm who was willing to risk his career for a cut of the potential payout. David was the who drafted the fake business plans and coached Jessica on how to present them. He insisted he was only trying to help her get back on her feet. He claimed he never took a dime from her, that the payments to Turner were from his own funds. He tried to frame it as an act of misguided generosity. "You lied to me," I said, cutting through his excuses. "You stood in this kitchen and held me while I cried over what they did to our daughter. You let me believe we were a team, that it was us against them, but you were one of them all along." "I was trapped, Pen," he pleaded. "Once I was in, I didn't know how to get out. Jessica and your mother, they can be very persuasive." It was the final straw. He was still protecting them, still making excuses. "Get out," I said. "Pack a bag and get out of my house." The shock on his face was almost comical. He never thought I would do it. He, like my mother and sister, had always underestimated me. With David gone, the house felt quiet and empty, but my mind was clear. I had all the pieces. It was time to bring the house down. My plan had 2 phases. Phase 1 was about containment and protection. The first thing I did was move the majority of our joint assets into an account that David couldn't access. I then met with a divorce lawyer, the best and most aggressive one I could find. I laid out the evidence of David's financial infidelity. The lawyer's eyes lit up. I wasn't just filing for divorce. I was building a case to ensure he would not get a penny more than he was legally entitled to, and that I would get full custody of Lily. Phase 2 was the main event. I compiled everything I had found into a single, meticulously organized digital file. My mother's bank statements showing the cash infusions, Jessica's fraudulent P and L statements, the business credit reports showing the liens, and David's payment records to the accountant. I wrote a cover letter, a simple, factual summary of the fraud scheme, from the initial deception to the planned acquisition. I addressed it to Mr. Robert Sterling, CEO of Sterling Assets. I found his email address through a professional database, but sending an email felt too impersonal, too easy to delete or ignore. I wanted to be certain my message was received. I put the entire package on a secure USB drive. I then called the main switchboard of Sterling Assets. "Hello," I said, my voice polite but firm. "My name is Penelope, and I have some urgent and confidential information regarding the due diligence for your pending acquisition of J. Lane Designs. This information pertains to significant financial fraud. I need to speak with Mr. Sterling's executive assistant immediately." That got their attention. Within minutes, I was speaking to a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Patricia. I explained the situation calmly and factually, without emotion. I told her I had irrefutable proof that the company they were about to acquire was a sham, and that I was prepared to go to the authorities if necessary. I told her I was sending a secure courier with a USB drive containing the full documentation. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention," she said finally, her voice all business. "We will await your package." The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. I told Lily a sanitized version of events, that Dad and I were having some problems and that he would be staying somewhere else for a while. She was sad and confused, but she was also resilient. She was focused on her schoolwork and her friends, and for that I was grateful. Then, the morning of the third day, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Is this Penelope?" a man's voice asked. It was Robert Sterling. He was brief and to the point. He had received my package. His internal audit team had verified my findings. The deal with J. Lane Designs was terminated, effective immediately. He also informed me that their legal department had filed a formal complaint with the state's attorney general, citing wire fraud and conspiracy. "You have saved my company millions of dollars and a great deal of embarrassment," he said, his voice grim. "Thank you." The news spread like wildfire. The first call was from a hysterical Jessica. "What did you do?" she shrieked into the phone. "They know, Sterling knows everything. They're talking about fraud. My life is over." I said nothing. I just listened to her panic, the sound of her perfect, curated world shattering into a million pieces. The next call was from my mother. She was sobbing, begging, pleading with me to fix this. She offered me money. She offered to apologize. She offered everything except genuine remorse. "You brought this on yourselves," I said, and for the first time in my life, I hung up on my mother. The bill had come due, and it was time for them to pay. The fallout was swift and brutal. The Attorney General's office launched a full-scale investigation. Jessica's name, once celebrated in the lifestyle blogs, was now splashed across the business section of the local newspaper under headlines that included the words fraud, scandal, and deception. Her influencer friends, the ones who had laughed at my daughter, vanished like mist in the morning sun. Her social media was flooded with angry comments from customers who had never received their orders and vendors who had never been paid. The boutique closed its doors within a week, a for lease sign appearing in the window where curated displays of overpriced clothing once stood. Jessica was forced to sell her Porsche and move out of her trendy loft apartment. The shame was absolute, but the legal consequences were far more severe. Faced with overwhelming evidence, both Jessica and the accountant, Michael Turner, took plea deals to avoid a lengthy trial. Jessica was sentenced to 2 years of probation, a hefty fine, and 2,000 hours of community service. Her career as an influencer was over, her brand toxic. Michael Turner was disbarred from practicing accounting and received a similar sentence. My mother, Paige, faced her own reckoning. While she avoided criminal charges, the investigation revealed the extent to which she had drained her own finances to fund Jessica's fantasy. She was forced to sell her large, beautiful home, the stage for so many of our family's painful dramas, and move into a small condominium. Her social circle, built on the perception of wealth and status, quickly abandoned her. Her punishment was not a legal one, but a social and financial one. She was left with the ashes of the life she had valued so highly. As for David, our divorce was finalized quickly. The evidence of his financial collusion with Jessica made the proceedings straightforward. He lost his architecture firm, his reputation tarnished by the scandal. He moved into a small apartment across town. I did not seek to punish him further. The consequences of his own actions were punishment enough. Our interactions now are brief and civil, focused solely on Lily. Perhaps one day he will truly understand the depth of his betrayal, but I am no longer waiting for that day to come. My life and Lily's is quieter now and infinitely more peaceful. The silence left by the absence of my mother and sister is not an empty one. It is a space filled with healing and calm. Lily is thriving. Without the constant, subtle pressure to impress her aunt or win her grandmother's approval, she has blossomed. She has joined the school's art club, and her drawings, full of color and life, cover our refrigerator. The haunted, hurt look in her eyes has been replaced by the bright, confident gaze of a young woman who knows she is loved and valued for exactly who she is. We talk more now. Lily and we have dinner together every night, and we talk about everything and nothing. One evening, a few months after everything had settled, she looked at me across the table. "Mom," she said, "I'm sorry you had to go through all that with Grandma and Aunt Jessica." I reached across and took her hand. "Don't ever be sorry," I told her. "What happened showed me what was truly important. It showed me that my real family is right here, in this house, with you." I still work as a forensic accountant, but my perspective has changed. I once saw my job as simply about finding the truth in numbers. Now, I see it as a search for justice. The experience taught me that the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones they call sensible and pathetic, have a strength that the loud, flashy ones can never understand. We see the details they miss. We have the patience to follow the trail, no matter how cold it gets. And when we are pushed too far, we know exactly how to dismantle the houses of cards they have so carelessly built. We are not the mistake children. We are the ones who hold them accountable. Our lives are not built on lies, but on a foundation of truth, a foundation that, unlike theirs, will never crumble.